So how are you going right now? How's your year progressing? This is our little counselling sessions before we start a lesson here. Are you getting the results you wanted? Are you getting the performances you wanted in your SACs? How are you? What I'm trying to investigate here with you here is like a little counselling session of just how are you going? Now, I'm thinking at this point here, you can be going, okay, well, apart from this just weird guy explaining how I'm feeling right now, but you might be able to attribute certain data to what you're saying, okay? Oh, am I doing well? Yes, because I got the grade I wanted in the last SAC, okay? Have I made improvements in my grades along the way? Okay, so there's certain data telling you what is, first of all, an ultimate feeling. Are you feeling happy or not feeling happy? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling optimistic, etc.? We're taking that feeling, and now if I explored that further with you in our counselling session, what would tell you that you're doing better or worse? Okay, in the same way for businesses, rather than be thinking about just a feeling of whether we're doing well or not, we're going to explore deeper here to what is called the key performance indicators, data which tells us whether we're doing well or not so well in certain key areas. So let's explore that in this lesson, key performance indicators. So taken from the study design, what we're going to explore in this lesson here is this thing called key performance indicators. We'll get abbreviated later on to KPIs. So if you hear that expression, you know what we're on about. But key performance indicators is the key terminology here. They are sources of data to analyze the performance of business. And we have a whole raft of them. So in this first part of the lesson, we're going to look at percentage of market share, net profit figures, rate of productivity growth, number of sales, and number of customer complaints. We will then look at the next ones in the second lesson, the companies. So there's a lot of detail to cover here. Let's get straight into it. So let's begin with a question. We talked about data being important. So is a business making $10 million profit this year? Is that good? Would you say $10 million profit good? Well, yes, you would. If you're talking about a cafe, a $10 million profit for a local corner shop cafe would be an amazing achievement. However, for a business like Qantas, $10 million profit isn't so good. So when we're talking about this key performance indicators and data, we need to be thinking, okay, in the context of what business, what other factors are at play, how much money has been invested in this business. So we're having a context to this data, the common phrase of lies and statistics, okay? So data itself isn't the end thing, but extrapolating that, analyzing that data, seeing what the trends and patterns are, and exploring what's happening to the business is what we're looking at as well. Okay, so businesses, data is really important. It tells a story and allows us to respond to that data. So going back to our counselling session, okay, you might look at the results of the SACs to see how you're progressing. You might have your own objective at the beginning of the year to get a certain grade or a certain score. How are your results matching that? Are you getting the SAC results you want to in order to review your performance this year? In the same way, businesses use data to see how they're tracking against their own business objectives. So you'll see graphs, you'll see pie charts, you'll see transitions of whether we're getting better and moving up or whether we're declining. Okay, what's happening to our percentage of market share? How much part of the business? So looking at data to inform us about how we're going and how we're tracking against our objectives. And this allows them to measure the effectiveness. Okay, are we achieving our objectives of the strategies we're using? And then therefore we're using these things called these KPIs, key performance indicators, to give us that data so we can assess the situation and work out where do we go from here. So not only are we looking for our own business, but we can also compare this performance against the best in the industry. Okay, this is called benchmarking. The idea being is, okay, let's say Singapore Airlines has achieved this level of profit. How is Qantas's profit going according to that? Are we doing as well as them or not as well as them? So firstly, we're achieving our own objectives. We can also benchmark our performance against other competitors in that industry to see how we're going against them as well. So the idea being, how can we stay competitive? So this is all about data. So this is a really important slide where we understand exactly what we mean by key performance indicators. So a key performance indicator, KPI, is a type of measurement that helps a business understand how they're performing in a certain area. So we pick a certain area and we've got data to tell us whether we're getting better or worse in that area. So therefore, this picture gives us an idea. The KPI should act like a compass, okay, guiding us towards the path, okay? Are we making progress towards our path, or are we veering away and we need to recalibrate and change our performance to achieve that objective? So to have a good KPI, it should be well-defined, quantifiable. We should have some facts, figures, numbers. We're looking at data to tell us what's going on. Are our profit figures gone from 10 to 20 million? Percentage of market share going from 20% to 30%. So quantifiable, well-defined data. We're looking for data that gives us a clear insight into the area we're concerned with. So if we're worried about accidents, well, the number of accidents in a year is data we can use to see whether we're achieving our objectives in that area. If we're more worried about the profit, the level of profit that we're getting in that area is important. We need to make sure that it's calculated properly. We're not just randomly picking numbers. Do we have a systematic process to getting that data? And can we compare that consistently year on year on year? We're doing it in the same way, collecting that data, so therefore we've got something to compare it to. And it should be, as we've said before, facts and figures, not just gut feelings of, yes, I'm feeling I'm going well or not well. Real data that gives us hard evidence to what we're trying to achieve. And so that data itself is going to be not the method of conveying it, but the actual facts and figures we get from it. So if you were to do a survey into the number of customer complaints, well, that's not going to give you any data. The actual results of that survey will give you the data. So think and separate the method of getting the data separate from the actual data itself. Okay, so the results of a survey is definitely data, but actually conducting the survey itself is the method of getting that data. So we want to keep those clearly separate. So ultimately, KPIs, key performance indicators, these are criteria that measure a business's efficiency and effectiveness in achieving different objectives. Pick an area, looking for data to give us an insight into how we're performing in that area. So let's look at these indicators in turn. There's a whole raft of them, so let's look at this one, okay? So percentage of market share. So percentage of market share represents the proportion of an industry or market's total sales that is earned by a particular company over a specific time period. Now, some of you already will have triggered off. I've heard of this before. We've talked about this idea of increasing market share back in our business objectives. So yes, it's going to be drawing on the same information. So this should hopefully feel comfortable for you. Okay, so we're looking at the proportion of the industry, the sales that is earned by our business in a particular time period. So our calculation is going to be done by taking the company's sales over the period of time and then dividing it by the total sales in the industry over the same period. So let's, for example, say that we made 30,000 units of sales. Okay, if the industry total for, let's just pretend it's going to be phones, okay, is 100,000, then we sold 30,000 out of 100,000, and therefore we had 30% market share. So that's our percentage of the total pie for that industry. So the percentage of market share is the proportion of industry sales that is earned by our business out of that pie in a particular time period. So what does this data tell us? Well, let's explore some different scenarios here. Let's pretend originally we had 29% percentage of market share. So we've nearly got a third of the industry sales retained by our business. Okay. Well, if that number falls to 10%, then that's showing that we've got falling sales as a percentage of the total industry sales, which means we're a little bit of a smaller player in that market. Less people are buying ours and more people are buying other people's products. Conversely, if we saw 29% go to 34% the next year, well, that's a positive result. We've got increasing sales in that total pie. So more people are buying our products. So again, that tells us a story, and we can now be thinking about how are we going to respond to that. So let's take the first one, which is the bad one. If we saw our market share decline from 29% to 10%, it's indicating we've got falling sales. It's a percentage of the industry. Why might that be occurring? Well, if we've got falling sales as a percentage of the industry, then maybe customers aren't happy with the quality of our products. They're not liking our products and they're buying our competitors instead. Well, then how can we solve that? Well, if we put our thinking hat on, okay, we could be thinking, okay, here, maybe we produce a better quality product. Maybe we use quality control or quality assurance or TQM. Or maybe we invest some money in staff training so that they can produce the better product for us. Now, again, that's going to improve the quality, and then hopefully in the future we'll see that number go back up to 30 or 40%. So we can see now how the data informs our decisions for a business. And this can lead on to other strategies that we can respond to. So you can see now, hopefully, how this data is part of business change. We get the data, and then we can respond to that. Maybe another reason why we've got falling sales is our prices are too high. Okay, and if our prices are too high, maybe we've got to lower our production costs. How can we do that? Well, we might look at different strategies to maybe reduce labour costs via lower labour wages, or make things overseas to take advantage of lower labour costs overseas. Maybe we're going to get cheaper and more materials from overseas. That could be one way of doing it. Or we could use our existing production facilities and maybe improve our productivity rates. Maybe we use better technology to reduce the cost per unit. So hopefully you can see now this is part of a story where businesses take the data, they think about what that data means to them, and then they consider ways of responding. So you're going to see a whole lot of links soon. Here, we've got technology, we've got quality coming in here, and we've got global considerations. So these are 3 parts of the course we've already experienced. And now you can see the story where we've got the data and the business is using that data to inform how they might respond to it in a way of changing the business to be more efficient and effective in achieving their objectives. Okay, our second key performance indicator we're going to look at is net profit figures. Now, for some of you, I'm going to jump ahead here. You've heard of this terminology before. It's about linked back to the business objectives. So if you can remember that, that's really good. We're going to base it and draw upon that knowledge there. But let's start again so we all feel comfortable. So net profit is a company's total revenue, excluding, so we take away its total expenses, and therefore that shows us what the company has earned or lost in a given period of time. Okay, so we're subtracting the total expenses from the total revenue is how we calculate net profit figures. Again, reinforced over and over again, so you feel really happy with it. Subtracting the total expenses from the revenue earned for a specific period of time. So let's have a little example here. So Mr. Wharton's candy shop, a nice little candy shop here. You know how much I enjoy my chocolate and candy. So let's pretend these are my figures. What is going to be my net profit figure at the end? Well, let's assume I've earned revenue of $100,000 from people buying an awful lot of candy. Okay, so I've got $100,000 of revenue in a given period of time. The cost of the candy goods sold is $20,000. So my gross profit is $80,000. However, as we've said here, it's taking away the total expenses, not just the cost of the candy, but also the salaries of my workers, the rent for the building. Okay, so let's assume that those add up to $30,000. I've also got taxes to pay, okay, of $10,000. So if I add all that up, then I'm then left with only $40,000 at the end, and that is my net profit. So net profit again is your revenue total at the top here, away from all of the expenses of your business. Okay, so when we put all of these expenses together, we subtract them, and that gives us our net profit figure. Okay, so looking at a company example here, this is straight from a business report, the annual report for Qantas for 2022, which shows their 5-year history financial report. Now you can go on any of the Australian Stock Exchange businesses and you'll see data like this. Now, at first glance, it looks overwhelming. But if we look at the keywords that we've been talking about, revenue and expenses, we can draw out from that how this business is going. So let's focus on this area first of all, the revenue. We had revenue going back in 2018 of $17,128 million. Okay. Now, over time for Qantas, we see it, one, get better, and then it starts to decline, and then quite seriously decline. Now, why is that occurring? We remember before, this period of time was the COVID disruptions where international flights were majorly disrupted and at some points completely closed down. Okay, so clearly the revenue has come down. International tourists can't buy flights on Australian Airlines to come into Australia, and therefore revenue falls. So then what we're looking for is how is the net profit going? Remember, net profit is the revenue which we have minus all the expenses, including the tax. So profit after tax is going to be our net profit figures. So what we can understand is, okay, obviously there's lots of expenses in running an airline. So out of the 17.128, I think that's billion, thousand million dollars, it's now only $953 million of profit. So it's still a very solid result. But as we anticipate the revenue starts to fall, we see in relation to that, the profit falls as well. And to a point at 2022 where whenever you see brackets, that's a negative figure. So they made a loss of $860 million. So this gap here is the expenses. The revenue minus the expenses give us our net profit. Now, what we can also see here is something else that's really important. If you remember who are the owners of a public listed company, they're the shareholders. And one of the reasons why they might be a shareholder is they're looking for dividends. The idea being that a dividend is a percentage of the profit given to its shareholders. Well, if we go back to 2018, you'll have seen the dividend per share was 17 cents per share. It then moved up to 25 cents per share in those boom years back up here when we were making $953 or $840 million of profit. Okay, we've allocated that to our shareholders. Okay, however, as we see the profits go into a loss, then suddenly you see all the dividends disappear. The idea being we have no profits to reallocate to dividends. Okay, so you can see now a link here between revenue, expenses, our net profit figures, but also what it means for other parts of the business, like our shareholders who are our owners in this public listed company. So what does this data mean? Again, we're looking for the story here. So if we're making originally in our business, in Mr. Wharton's candy store, okay, if I'm making originally $50,000 of net profit, and then the following year I make $10,000 of net profit, then clearly it's fallen, okay? Now, remember, net profit is revenue minus expenses. So there's going to be a couple of stories here. Either my revenue has fallen or my costs are rising, or both, which both of them may have squeezed into my profit. Equally, the opposite story, which is a much more positive one, is originally I was making $50,000 profit. Now I'm making $100,000. That's a good result, okay? Either my revenue has increased, I'm making more money at that end, or my costs have fallen, or both, and therefore I'm making a better net profit figure. Okay, so that's telling me some information about how my business is going. What I then want to explore is how will I then transition that in the future? What does it tell us, and what might this indicate? So unfortunately, in the first situation here, if my profit figures, my net profit figures are falling, my revenue is either falling, or maybe my costs are rising, or maybe both. What is that occurring? Why is it occurring? And what might this indicate? Well, maybe it's indicating if my revenue is falling that my customers are not happy with the product. They're not buying so much, and therefore I'm getting decreasing revenue. Okay, so we break this down. We think about all the parts and we break it down, and we're seeing that, okay, my revenue is falling. Maybe my customers aren't happy. And my next part of the story is then, therefore, that's probably leading to decreasing sales. Therefore, I'm getting decreasing revenue. How can I do something about that? Well, maybe I can introduce quality strategies, make better quality candy. Okay, or I can increase the staff training so that my business is working better and my staff are giving better customer service training, or I can motivate my staff in some way so they're really keen to sell my candy. All of that should lead to increased revenue. Suddenly, I'm back on the way up again, and I'll be looking for my figures to improve over time. Equally, the second part of that was maybe my costs are rising, and that's squeezing down my net profit figures. So if my costs are too high, I might need to cut back on my costs. Again, how can I possibly do that? Well, maybe I can use some cost-cutting measures, okay? I can get cheaper supplies of candy from overseas, okay? Maybe I can do some lean production techniques and reduce waste in my production line. Maybe I can reduce the labor costs, okay? Maybe I can make my candy overseas. Maybe I can have lower labor entitlements associated with that. Or maybe I can get better at making candy, increase my productivity rates by having better technology. So again, we're going to see a whole bunch of links to operations management and also human resources in terms of getting the results we want for net profit figures. So again, hopefully you can see this is a story where we're using all the information we've had from the previous areas of study and thinking about that and then drawing out how we can respond in the future. Okay, our next key performance indicator we're going to look at is the rate of productivity growth. Okay, so first of all, that's a key takeaway here. The rate of productivity growth is the increase in outputs produced from a given level of inputs over a period of time. Okay, so how much have we increased our outputs from the same level of inputs in a period of time? So this is a classic measure of efficiency. How well are we using our resources to achieve the outputs we're looking for here? So what we're looking at here is the rate of productivity growth, okay? Are we getting more productive over time? Are we increasing the level of producing? So let's put this in a little example so we can see that. We're going to go back to our little baker that we've looked at before. So here's our baker. If in 1 hour he produces 1 loaf of bread, then we therefore have 1 loaf of bread in 1 hour. Okay, easy. Now, however, if he gets more productive and produces 12 loaves in 1 hour, then we've increased our productivity rate. We've gone from 1 in 1 hour to 12 in 1 hour, and therefore we're getting an increase. So we've gone from 1 in 1 hour to 12 in 1 hour. We've increased by a factor of 11 in 1 hour, okay, and therefore our productivity rate is increased to 1,100%. That's our rate of productivity growth. If you can imagine there, we're being much more efficient, aren't we? So just in a visual sense, we've got all these loaves of bread. We're being more productive in the same period of time. So rate of productivity growth is that increase in outputs and the given level of inputs in the same period of time. Now, again, you'll have seen this before when we talked about efficiency back in area study 1. So some of you will be seeing some of those connections there. I know where that came from. And we're just building on that knowledge. So again, we want to be thinking, what does this data tell us? If we looked at data for rate of productivity growth, what is that telling us? And then how does that inform our business decisions going forward? So first of all, let's take our rate of productivity, okay? If our productivity growth is 30%, but then it declines in the following year to 20%, then clearly the numbers are coming down. This is a bad result. Our productivity is falling. So if this is our area of concern, falling number is indicating that we're not doing so well in this area. Our productivity is falling, okay? So why might that be occurring? If we take that stage further, so why is productivity falling? We're thinking in our heads, okay, we're in the bakery, what's maybe going wrong, meaning that we're producing less loaves of bread per hour than we did before. Well, maybe our ovens or our machinery is failing, okay? Our production line isn't working as well, maybe it's older materials, and therefore we can't produce it as fast, and therefore that's why our productivity is falling. What's the other reason? Okay, we've got a baker. Maybe this baker isn't working as well as he used to do in the past, and they're failing to produce the goods as quickly. So maybe it's a staffing issue. Or maybe I'm thinking, okay, why aren't we producing as many loaves of bread? Well, maybe the yeast and the flour that's arriving isn't arriving on time, and we're having to stop production for a period of time. So maybe there's a logjam in the inputs arriving on time. So this data is informing us. We're analysing and thinking, why is this occurring? And now, if I want to respond to that, what could I possibly do? Well, if it's about the machinery, well, maybe I can invest in better machinery, invest in new technology, or redeploy resources into a new area. That could be one way of solving it. If it's my bakery and my staff aren't producing as quickly, maybe I can do some work to improve their motivation or give them some better training on or off the job to try and make them work better. If it's about the supplies not arriving or getting blocked on time, then maybe I can have a just-in-time production system employed. So again, we can see the story here where the data then informs our decisions for making actions and strategies in the future, and we can use these strategies, again, from operations or human resource management to try and solve that problem. So again, we're looking at data to give us information, and we use that information to then build in strategies into our business to respond to that data. Okay, our next key performance indicator we're going to look at is the number of sales. Now, this one is relatively straightforward. If we think about it, it's the measure of the total amount of goods or services sold in a given reporting period. So how many sales have we made? Okay, keep it really simple in your head, okay, about that. So what we're looking at is therefore hoping to see increase in sales over time, which is going to be a positive result. And equally, if we're selling less items over time, then that's a negative result. So like we've broken down, number of sales is generally a nice and simple one to work out. We're looking at the number of sales in a given period of time. But there are other things to think about as we go through this. So we don't just want to see the raw data going, sales going up or going down. Is that a good or bad thing? There might be other reasons why these things are occurring. The first one could be something like seasonal fluctuations. Let's pretend I'm Cocoa Plaque producing beautiful, exquisite gourmet chocolates and hot chocolates. Well, chocolate is generally a winter product, so we would expect sales to increase during winter when people are feeling cold and they want to hunker down and have a hot chocolate, have that lovely feeling of the chocolate coming into their mouth, okay? Now, during the summer, understandably, people instead want an ice cream or they want to have an icy pulse because they don't want the chocolates. So we would expect seasonal fluctuations occurring in sales. So we need to bear that in mind when we're looking at the data. If the data is going up and down, is there a reason behind it? And in this case here, there's a seasonal variation at play that we need to consider. Another thing to think about is number of sales. Well, that's how many products we're selling. Well, there's going to be a relationship here as well between that and market share. The idea being, how are we going compared to how other people are selling their products? So if we're in the industry of chocolate here and with Cocoa Black and we have 30% market share, well, that's probably, and goes up to 40%, well, that's probably going to be a result of our increasing sales. So number of sales is going to be linked to the market share. Also think that number of sales, people are buying your products because they like them. So there's generally a link with customer popularity. But let's not jump straight away to the conclusion that increasing sales necessarily results in increasing profit. What you can see down below here is we have increasing sales. We've gone from 10 sales to 100 sales. That's really good. But if the reason why we got more sales is because we reduced the price, then our revenue is going to go down here. So originally, let's pretend a box of chocolates cost us $110, but we reduced the price of that down to $10. Well, clearly people are going to buy more, okay? Originally here at 10 sales at $110 a box, okay, we made $110 revenue, okay, with the cost of $100. Therefore, we made $1,000 profit. However, now when we reduce the prices of those boxes of chocolates, the 100 sales, there's a lot more sales, but we're actually making less revenue than we did before because the price of those boxes of chocolates has gone down. If the cost is still 100, then we're actually making less profit. Even though the sales have gone up, our profits have gone down. So we've got to be very careful here that we don't just launch into the assumption that number of sales going up, we're obviously making more profits. We need to delve deeper into both the revenue and how much money we're making from those sales and also the expenses that are associated with it. So let's keep it nice and simple. Number of sales is just the total quantity of goods and services sold by a business over a specific time period. So let's see this as a contemporary case study of how the Australian supermarket industry is going. And what you're going to see here is that link we talked about before between sales and also percentage of market share. So let's take Aldi, for example. They made $12.8 billion worth of sales. So the sales are explored here. We have fresh food stores at $12.2 billion, other supermarkets at $9.4, and the classics of Coles at $27.4 billion worth of sales, and Woolworths at $34 billion worth of sales. What you'll also see then is the percentage of market share, because all of those sales combined add up to a big number, and you then work out the percentage that each one has, and therefore we have here Coles having 26.6% market share compared to Aldi's 12.4%. So you can see when you combine all the sales for that industry, you can then work out the percentage of market share from it as well. So you can see the relationship between those two things together. So again, let's look at what the data tells us, and then we analyze that and think, okay, what is it really possibly the story behind it, and how can we make our business better as a result of it? Okay, so let's imagine originally we were making $100,000 worth of sales. So the number of sales is 100,000, but now it's fallen to $80,000 worth of sales. Okay, when the sales fall, it's an indication to us that less customers are buying it, and therefore this product is less popular. Now we think to ourselves, why is the product maybe less popular? Why is the chocolates that we're producing less popular? Maybe those chocolates aren't meeting the customer needs. Maybe customer trends have changed and customers now want more organic chocolates, or they want healthier versions of chocolates, and ours don't meet those customer needs. Maybe people aren't buying our chocolates because the price is too high. The cocoa black chocolates are too expensive compared to competitors, and therefore they're not buying our products. Maybe our marketing isn't going very well and people are just not aware of the product, or they're not aware of them as much as they were before, and therefore the sales are declining. Now that we've analysed a bit more of that data, we can think, okay, how can we possibly respond? Well, if it's not meeting the customer needs, then maybe we can improve the quality and production, improve our staff training so we can produce better quality chocolates. Maybe if the price is too high, we can lower that price and maybe find ways of reducing costs from our supplies or production methods to try and be able to lower that price. Or maybe if the marketing isn't working, we can improve the marketing to customers. Now, again, we can see how that information came from previous areas in human resources and also operations as strategies to solve that problem. So again, we're getting a story. We've got some data. It gives us some information about how the business is performing. We can now then understand that data and think about strategies to try and resolve that situation. Okay, our next key performance indicator is the number of customer complaints. Hopefully, again, it's quite self-explanatory, this one. Okay, so the number of complaints is literally the number of customers who have notified the business of their dissatisfaction over a specific period of time. So as data, we might be recording how many complaints we get, okay? Whether it be from social media, verbal complaints, somewhere we're going to record these number of complaints and see whether they're increasing or decreasing over a period of time. So let's take, for example, that in month 1 we got 10 complaints, okay, recorded, and the next month we get 4 complaints, then we can see that as an improvement, okay? We've got less complaints than we had before. Hopefully customers are happier with our product than they were before. Now, it's important to bear in mind that no matter how wonderful your business is, the old adage unfortunately still applies, is that you can't please all the people all the time. So inevitably, most businesses will expect to experience some level of complaints. The key point is if you start to see a trend where the complaints are rising over a period of time, or that they're very large numbers. So one or another complaint, you almost have to accept as part of business. But if you're seeing a trend or you're seeing very large numbers, then that's the thing. So when you see an unusually large number of complaints, or that complaints have been steadily increasing over time without improving customer growth, there could be a problem lurking behind here. So again, this data is informing you about what's going on. Equally and very importantly, the number of customer complaints can be seen as the tip of the iceberg. I, for one, if I was to grab my coffee from a local corner store and I didn't enjoy my coffee, I might not go back and complain. I just might never go back there again. Okay, so I'm one of those quiet customers who I will vote with my feet. So the actual complaints are usually from more vocal customers. The customer who gets their coffee, doesn't like it, walks back in again and makes a big statement about it. So often it's the tip of the iceberg. If you can imagine for yourself, are you one of those people that complains, or you just won't come back there again in the future? Okay, there's different customers out there. So if you're one of those that never visit, then that's, again, lost sales and lost profits. So this is the tip of the iceberg, and therefore we need to take number of complaints seriously, because these people deliberately notified the business that they were dissatisfied. If we look at the data for informing us about how we're going, originally we had 100 custom complaints. Now we've got 200. So the number has increased, but it's showing us that people are less satisfied. So here, this is a bad figure, okay? So this one here, when the numbers increase, it's a bad news story, okay? Unlike for profit figures, when we see the numbers increase, that's a good thing, okay? For this one here, when the numbers increase for number of customer complaints, that's a bad thing. So what is it telling us? That customers are becoming more dissatisfied. They're not happy with our product. Then what we look at is, why might that be occurring? Now, obviously, there's lots of reasons. So we think, okay, why are they complaining? What are the numbers going up? Well, maybe the quality of the product is declining. They're not happy with the product. Or maybe our customer service is declining. Now, that again gives us some reason to analyze the business, and then we can look at different things. If it's the quality of the product, maybe we can bring in some quality control measures or quality assurance to improve that quality. Maybe we can invest in technology to improve the quality. Or staff training or motivation, again, focus on improving the quality of the product. Or if it's about the staffing, and the staffing customer service is going down, maybe we can invest in training or motivation to improve on that for us. So again, we got links here to previous areas of study, human resources and operation strategy to try and make and resolve the problems that were occurring due to the number of customer complaints. What we want to see occurring is that 100 reducing, okay? So this is showing that our business is improving in this area here, but the numbers of customer complaints declining, okay? So this one is a inverse relationship. Number of customer complaints going up is bad, okay? Numbers falling is a really good story. Okay, well, hopefully this slide here puts together a lot of content and you can see it visually in one slide alone. So it's a nice summary. So remember that key performance indicators, KPIs, is a type of measurement to help a business understand how they're performing in a certain area. Okay, so we're looking at data that's going to tell us how we're going in a certain area. So far in this lesson here, we've covered the percentage of market share, net profit figures, productivity rates, number of sales, and number of customer complaints. We will move on to the second part, which is the other KPIs of staff absenteeism, staff turnover, wastage, workplace accidents, and number of website hits in our next lesson. So I look forward to seeing you there. Next lesson comes up.